Welcome to Game Day here on the fourth period. That's Dennis Bernstein in Montreal. I'm Dave Pagnotta in Toronto. Some big news in the goaltenders market in the National Hockey League. We'll get to that and a lot more here as our coverage continues, presented by CCM Hockey. All right, DB. We were going to do this without talk of Jake Oettinger, and then he locks in to his 8-year, $66 million contract that some say, well, it's the same as Allmark. It's the same as Jeremy Swayman. Although Jake plays in a no income tax state. So the take home is going to be a little bit more. Your reactions to the contract?
Well, it was a hard salary cap, so not everybody can play in Dallas or Nashville. And last time I checked, Dallas won last, I think, in 1999, and Nashville never won. So let's not talk about too much about state income tax. Here's the thing. Mamas, let your sons grow up to be goalies now. Because, and I'm sure we'll talk about Shesterkin, Dave, but this is where the market is now. If you're a number one goaltender who's going to play 55 games a season, you're probably going to land at $8.25 million. It doesn't set the market for Shesterkin because he's a different cat, different animal. We'll talk about that. But this is where everybody's landing. So at least there's now a standard. And I think that's what the goalies union wanted, Dave, is to set a standard here for these number one goaltenders.
Yeah, and you know, these negotiations weren't as in-depth or as long as those with Swayman and Boston carrying out over the summer. There weren't really that many hard-depth discussions between Ben Hankinson, who represents Jake Oettinger, and Jim Nill, the GM of the Dallas Stars, who was coincidentally at the game in Toronto yesterday between the Maple Leafs and the LA Kings. But he managed to finalize that deal, get that deal done in somewhat short order. They really started picking things up once the season got going last week. But this is a good deal for the Dallas Stars. They don't have to worry about their goaltender. He's locked in. And we kind of now shift focus, I guess, a little bit more to Igor Shesterkin. And everybody's saying, well, Oettinger got 8.25. You know, Shesterkin's looking for 12 plus. Is he worth that much more? Again, on an AAV side, there's a big gap. But the take-home money is almost the same at $12 million in New York versus 8.25 in Dallas, if you really simplify the math. It's a lot more complicated than that. But where do you see things actually fitting here now that Oettinger's locked in with Shesterkin in New York?
Well, I'm not putting Jake Oettinger in the same conversation as Shesterkin until he comes through in the playoffs, Dave. So that's the first thing. And I get the differential, but here's the thing. Is he worth $12 million to the Rangers, Shesterkin? And I say he is, and here's why. Look at the type of team they have, Dave. This is not a puck possession team. This is not some team that dominates puck possession play for 60 minutes. They usually get out chance. They get out shots. So they need this player to have success in the playoffs. And granted, yes, I know he hasn't taken them to the promised land. I think he's worth more to this team than any other team because of their style of play. And because of that, I necessarily wouldn't have a problem with $12 million for this player.
Yeah, I wrote about it on Monday in my last column that, 8 times 12, probably get to the finish line or at least get significantly closer to it. Those conversations, they're going to continue. But it's interesting now. You take Jake Oettinger, who's another top-tier goaltender. He's going to be an RFA and then UFA afterwards, but he's off the market. The next goalie that's kind of part of this conversation, Adin Hill in Vegas. He's on an expiring contract. He's making $4.9 million on an AAV. I talked to both sides this morning after Oettinger's deal. Nothing has been going on to this point. There's nothing imminent, but conversations are expected to pick up in and around the new year. Now, maybe Oettinger's deal escalates things, but as of this morning, that's kind of the mindset that they'll kind of tackle this towards the second half of the season, maybe just prior to it. But look, Jerry Johansson, Adin Hill's agent, his phone line is open, and I'm sure the boys in Vegas, their phone lines will be wide open too if they want to figure this out.
Well, but they've had so many goaltenders, and here's the difference between Vegas and Dallas. And you knew probably 3 years ago that Jake Oettinger was the guy. He's going to sign a long-term contract at some point in time. He was drafted in the first round. Vegas won. Look who they won with. They won Adin Hill. They got to the Cup final with Fleury. They had Leonard there for a while. They had Logan Thompson. They traded him. I can't believe that their approach to goaltending with respect to a roster and AAV is going to be like at the $8 million a year for Adin Hill. Now, if Adin Hill comes back in against 2 rings, he'll come back with Jerry Johansson, throws 2 rings on the table during the negotiations with McCrimmon and McPhee, and I'll say, hey, pay me. but I just don't put him at that tier of these other guys that we signed. It's not necessarily his fault. It's also a function of how good and how depthful the Vegas team is.
Yeah, and if he does hit free agency as a UFA in July, if they don't get a deal done later on this season or in June, there may be some options for Adin Hill.
Sure, I'm sure.
I know DB. I know it's really early now, and everybody loves to panic. I guess it's not as pressing in Edmonton at the moment because they
Oh,
got a
here we
W in
go.
overtime.
Yeah.
But what the hell is happening in Colorado with Alex Georgiev, with
Don't know.
Pittsburgh and Tristan Jarry? Georgiev's a UFA at the end of the season, excuse me. So they got more flexibility there. Jarry's got a few more
Mm-hmm.
years left on his contract at 5.375. What's going on with both of these guys?
Well, Pittsburgh's going to have some help coming in because Nedeljkovic is coming off of IR. He's going to do a conditioning stint in the AHL. So there's some support there. There's not really a lot of support in Colorado, and Chris McFarland has to do something. Because when you watch these goals going against Georgiev, and I get it, like what was their model, Dave? How did they win a championship? They went with Darcy Kemper, and no disrespect to Darcy Kemper, but Darcy Kemper was a 915 save percentage guy up there. He wasn't so in Washington. Hasn't really been there in LA so far. So I think it's their formula saying, okay, we don't need that $8 million, that $10 million goalie that maybe Florida did or New York does because we have such a depthful team. But when you look at the holes on this team, Dave, and it's not just the goaltending. I get it. Like in the game against Boston at home, that goal by Lindholm from the boards can't go in. I get there was a screen, but it's been consistently the weak link for this team. And I draw a parallel to what didn't happen in New Jersey last year with Tom Fitzgerald. Like Tom Fitzgerald knew he needed a goalie early in the season and never did anything about it until it was too late. He got Jake Oettinger, ultimately traded for Markstrom. I think Chris McFarland really needs to dial up a little bit here in Colorado to see what other options there are. I know John Gibson's still hurt in Anaheim, but they're looking to make trades with respect to Cam Fowler as well. So there's more of a sense of urgency if I'm Chris McFarland, because again, Colorado had designs on winning it all, getting back into serious Stanley Cup contention. I don't really look at that Pittsburgh team as that way. So to do that with that deficiency in goal this early, you got to be concerned if you're Chris McFarland and the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, and it was Jake Allen, not Ottinger, that New Jersey
Oh,
guy.
okay. Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Ottinger's on the brain. I get it. He's not
Yeah,
on
exactly.
topic today. But yeah, Colorado's got something. They got to figure something out here, and obviously cap situation's questionable because the anticipation that Landeskog comes back, Nikushkin comes back, and so on. So interesting situations in both of those. You're right on Pittsburgh. They're going to see how Nedeljkovic can do before jumping in. Bloomquist has done an admirable job, but 12 goals in his first 3 games, less than really full 3 games for Jarry. 17 goals against in 4 games
Yeah.
for Colorado and Georgiev.
Coming off
They got
and a better an average season last year, Dave. So it's not just like a very small sample size. Like he wasn't good last year. So the bad start on top of last year, where it was mediocre at best, you have to be concerned in Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah, we'll see if these get addressed at any point over the next few weeks because nobody wants to jump the gun yet on a big move, especially in either of those two markets. So we'll see kind of how things develop. Can they fix it internally? If not, maybe, like you said, a John Gibson could be somebody that they take a look at. But this always plays a factor as well. That's Dennis in Montreal. You'll be at the game between the Kings and Habs. I'm Dave here in Toronto. I got a couple days off before the Leafs play on Saturday. We will catch you again later here on the Fourth Period and on our YouTube channel as our coverage continues, brought to you as always by CCM Hockey.